It's time for the next project. I've been contacted by a lady who collects mortars and pestles, and she wants me to do a custom one for her. This isn't one that's functional. It's basically going to be a piece of art and part of her collection. So I'm going to do it out of this birch burl and resin. So I'll put this in the bottom of a pail and put that on top. And then I'll have a casting that I can do a design with. This piece has a similar kind of grain, and I'll use that part for the pestle. And again, that piece I will cast separately into another vessel. Well, let's see if I can get it done. That would be something. The first task is to get the bark off. That sounds like a Russian hockey player, but let's try it. I got a date on here as to when I got these burls. Here are the cleaned up pieces. I've sprayed mold release in each of these. Just like a glove. It's a perfect fit. It's time to mix the resin. This is Designer Epoxy's resin. It's called Deep Cast. I've been using this for quite a few years and it has never failed me. Very nice stuff. And this is turquoise blue. We'll try that out. That's the mica powder that we're going to be putting in. Okay, so. And 2 parts of part 8, and we do more cups. I'm going to be putting that into the bigger pot, and that's for the overflow of bubbles. They'll go into this pail rather than into my vacuum chamber. I've placed both molds into the vacuum chamber. The vacuum sucks out all of the air from the resin and from the wood. That's where the bubbles come up. After a couple of hours, I convert the vacuum chamber into a pressure pot, and that stays in for 3 days. Now it's time to take the casting out of the pressure pot. The casting should be solid by now, so releasing all of the pressure at once isn't going to make the resin splash up. This resin on the bottom was the result of air bubbles coming out and going over. This isn't a real waterproof seal around here. This is how much resin came out from bubbles. Well, I had to cut this out of the mold. Now it's time to get this out of the pail. I had a lot of trouble getting this out. It wouldn't come out because the resin hadn't totally cured. And what happens when the resin is still a little soft, it sticks to the edge of the pail and you really can't get it out. So this is now cured significantly. Boy, that was pretty easy. Well, here we go. Next step. I now have the piece mounted between centers and will true it up. I also need to flatten the bottom so that I could glue on a waste block. You now see how the mortar is starting to take shape. For the most part, I'm using carbide tipped tools from huntertools.com. This is the best tool to use when there's a lot of resin. To hollow out the mortar, I'm drilling a hole to the finished depth. This helps me save time and is more accurate when hollowing out the piece. Sanding usually starts at between 80 and 120 grit and goes all the way up to 1200 plus. Sanding is very tedious and time-consuming work, but it needs to be thorough or the finished surface will not be perfect. Once the sanding is finished, I have to find a way to finish off the bottom. The process I use is called reverse turning. I take the piece off the lathe and replace it with a vacuum chuck. The piece is still attached to the faceplate, and I reverse it and attach it now to the tailstock. When I force the piece against the vacuum chuck, it will be completely centered and will run true. I can now remove the faceplate from the mortar. When I do that, the vacuum chuck will hold the piece in place. This will give me complete unimpeded access to the bottom of the piece. I can then turn away the waste block and clean up the bottom. With the vacuum still holding the piece in place, I can do the finish sanding on the bottom. When the sanding's completed, I use denatured alcohol to clean up all the remaining dust. Then I polish the surface with a buffing wheel. This gets rid of the final minute scratches on the resin and leaves a beautiful finish for the finishing coat. I reverse the piece onto the vacuum chuck and then begin the process of putting on finishing coats. I actually turn the piece at a very low speed. I'm not concerned about it being centered, as all I'm doing is putting on the finish. Turning the pestle is straightforward. It's just like turning a spindle. Because of all the resin involved, I use the hunter tools that are carbide tipped. The sanding and finishing is done in the same manner as the mortar was done. One of the tricks to the finishing is to saturate the piece with the finish and then rub as much as you can off. This is allowed to dry overnight and the process repeated several times in a row. Here's the finished mortar and pestle. I think it turned out wonderful. The colors in here are just gorgeous. The burl is phenomenal. This turned out very nice. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. And most importantly, hit the bell. That's going to give you notice when my next videos come out. A comment is always appreciated. Stay tuned for a close-up of this. You'll be surprised how gorgeous it is.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. Doesn't matter if my beard is gray. Just listen, I have something to say.
Grandpa Dennis is turning.
I'm alright, 'cause I'm okay. And this old goat has something to say. So just keep learning. For Grandpa Dennis is turning.